Ian Marcos is the lead Senate candidate for the Liberal Democrats at the federal election in South Australia. How are you going, Ian?
Yeah, very good, Ricky.
Ian, look, I want to talk a bit about your background first. We'll come to some of these things like lockdowns and restrictions that South Australians have experienced. But first of all, what do you bring in terms of your work and life background into this run for the Senate?
Yeah, well, I retired probably about a year and a half ago, Ricky, but prior to that, I was the Chief Executive Officer of the Master Builders Association here, and most of my career has been in and out of the construction industry. I've owned my own little small business there. I was a commercial diver for a while. I've worked around Australia and spent some time working in the UK, based in London, but worked right around the UK. When I came back, I worked for a national Tier 1 construction company, and then following that, I went to the Master Builders Association.
All right. Now, just briefly, you did run in the state election for, SA Best in their upper house campaign. Is that right?
Yes, it was a very short campaign. It was really to kind of represent the building and construction industry and the small business sector in the state. And for some time I thought that, the small business sector has really been doing it tough, and particularly over the last 2 years. And that was the real platform I wanted to run on. And Frank Pengello approached me, and I thought, well, I spoke to the business community and they were quite supportive, so we thought we'd give it a crack.
Now, you mentioned the business community. I guess even heading into 2020, when the COVID-19 problem became serious, there was already some difficulties for the small business sector, but really exacerbated by lockdowns and restrictions in SA.
Yeah, absolutely. And there'll be many of those small businesses that will never get back up on their feet again. And it's been the most, devastating thing. And when you think about it, those small businesses, a lot of them are family owned. Everything that they own, all their money's on the table. They take the risks, and on a lot of occasions, obviously, they pay their employees before they pay themselves. And many of them have lost everything, Ricky. It hasn't been good.
Yeah, I noticed at the state election, James Hole, the lead candidate, we interviewed him. I think the LDP got its best primary vote that we've seen in South Australia. You'd be buoyed by that show of support, and has some of it come off of the protests about restrictions and lockdowns?
Definitely, I think it has. But the Liberal Democrats are a true libertarian party. I mean, I've never felt at home as much, I guess, if you could describe it that way, as I do at the moment. Their policies, for anyone who wants to get on their website and have a look, I think are fantastic. They are the future, I think. There's so many people disenchanted with the major two parties, the Liberal Party in particular. I think they've become infested in the Liberal Party with what I call wets or moderates. And we could see what happened at the state election.
Well, the Liberal Party would uphold itself as a party that represents small business, whereas the Labor Party tends to represent the workers. But are you saying they don't represent small businesses anymore, the Liberal Party?
No, I don't think they do. They're more interested in their own self-interest, their own careerism. They're dictated to by the factions in the Liberal Party. They're consumed by internal politics, and anyone who knows them can see that. There's always been the Pine faction with Birmingham and Marshall, and the majority of the cabinet were from the left. And, they were consumed with fighting each other instead of looking after the people who elected them. And I think that was borne out, in the state election. You had Malinauskas, who came out with a vision. I think, that bloke is a leader. He's not afraid to stand up the front and say what he believes in. And Marshall had gone missing. You had a retiring treasurer running their campaign for them. And with that attitude where they think that, they're a sense of entitlement. And I think they'd forgotten not only about the small business sector, but about, blue-collar, working-class families out in the suburbs.
To what extent? It seemed to us that COVID-19 restrictions played a part as well. Stephen Marshall kept saying during press conferences, I don't want these restrictions to stay for a day longer than they need to, but then admitted about 3 weeks out from the poll, look, in hindsight, we could have dropped some of them earlier.
Yeah, well, of course he could. I mean, the thing is, I sat on his Premier's Committee, Response and Recovery Committee. I got removed from that committee because he didn't like what I was saying, which is typical. But the thing is, we lost our representative system of government, which should never, ever be allowed to occur again. Now, we elect politicians who really are our elected employees. And you can go and see them, you can communicate with them, you can correspond with them, let them know your views, what you think. How do you do that with a police commissioner? So unelected bureaucrats have been running the state now. They're still running it now. We're still living in this so-called state of emergency now for well over 2 years. And we've lost our representative system of parliament. That should never be allowed to occur.
When you talk about small business, I gather that some of the attraction for you with the Liberal Democrat platform is also its inclination is towards deregulation rather than more regulation. Am I correct?
Yeah, exactly. So it's about, small government, less taxes, trying to keep government out of people's lives. We believe that people know best how to raise their family, how to raise their kids, how to, manage their own risk in life and take responsibility for that risk. So it's really a true libertarian type of platform. The government is there for the essential services and the things that we really need. And by way of example, as you know, we have a federal education department, we have a state education department, but the feds don't run any schools. Why are they there?
Well, that's a good question on the topic of housing. It touches somewhat your experience with Master Builders. Labor's announcement over the weekend that they would support 10,000 regional Australians buying their own home. But when you drill into the detail, South Australians, the property price cap is $350,000. I mean, how much can you build a house for these days?
Look, unfortunately, it's land value, Ricky. I mean, we've got an urban growth boundary and you've got land banking within inside that boundary. But I'll tell you what the real cost is. Up to 30% of the cost of building a new home is in government taxes and charges. So the simple thing to do is get rid of the over-regulation and the taxes and you'll get a 30% saving already. The big worry with the Labor plan scheme is it's potentially now, because it's not limited to first home buyers, and it's not even means tested. So this is going to become a raw. You can tell straight away.
Well, this is the regional housing one. They say will be limited to people who own $125,000 as a single income or $200,000 as a dual income household. That doesn't sound like your Howard's Battlers to me.
No, and it doesn't. And you can look at it this way. There'll be people out there looking at this already thinking, well, how about we sell our house, we can invest that money in the markets or whatever and get a good return, and then we'll stick our hand up for the government to pay 40% of another house for us. I can just see where this is going to go. Now, even more concerning now is that you've got organisations like the Property Council coming out and saying this scheme needs to be expanded. Now, you only have to remember back a few years ago, when you put so much money, government money like this into a scheme, it becomes an enormous risk to Australian taxpayers. And how's that debt going to be managed? Is it going to be managed by mortgage-backed securities or collateralised debt obligations? I wonder what on earth could go wrong there. Remember back to the USA with the Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae?
Yes.
And how, house prices, purchases for people who couldn't afford it. The outcome was higher house prices and a massive bust. And that's what they've got to be very careful about.
Well, Ian, some plenty of experience to tap into there, and maybe that's where it should go, is into the Senate. It was great to chat with you today, running for the Liberal Democrats in South Australia in the Senate race on the 21st of May. Thanks for joining us today, Ian.
Cheers, Ricky. Thank you very much.